What happens when two of the world's most powerful nations get called out by a leader who controls one of the largest nuclear arsenals on the planet? And what if that leader just unveiled a weapon so advanced it seems almost unstoppable? These aren't scenes from a spy thriller. This is real, and it's happening now. Russia has fired a missile unlike anything seen before, and President Vladimir Putin has issued a chilling warning to the US and UK. What does this mean for the rest of the world? When Vladimir Putin speaks, the world pauses to listen. This week, his words were more than a warning, they were a declaration of intent. On national television, Putin addressed not just his citizens, but the global community, calling out the US and UK for their support of Ukraine. His tone was resolute, his words clear. Supplying weapons to Ukraine that are used against Russian targets is, in his view, an act of aggression. He didn't stop there. Putin directly accused the West of crossing a line, saying, "We believe that we have the right to use our weapons against military facilities of the countries that allow their weapons to be used against us." It's a chilling statement, hinting at a willingness to escalate the conflict far beyond Ukraine's borders. The timing of his remarks wasn't coincidental. Just days before, British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles were used in strikes on Russian territory for the first time. And with President Biden recently approving similar long-range missile strikes, Putin saw an opportunity to frame the West's actions as provocations, not just support for Ukraine. According to him, these aren't isolated actions, they're part of a broader campaign to weaken Russia. But here's what makes this even more significant. Putin claims the West isn't just supplying weapons. He accuses NATO, particularly the US and UK, of providing satellite intelligence and operational guidance to Ukraine. In his eyes, this transforms them from allies to active participants in the conflict. The question now is, how far will he go to back up his warnings? Warnings are one thing, action is another. Putin didn't just talk, he showed the world what Russia is capable of. Enter the Oreshnik missile, a hypersonic weapon that represents the cutting edge of military technology. This week, it was deployed in a strike on Dnipro, Ukraine, targeting what Russia claims was a military-industrial facility. Why is this missile so terrifying? For starters, it travels at 10 times the speed of sound. That's Mach 10. At that speed, existing missile defense systems are virtually useless. Military experts believe the Oreshnik is an experimental weapon, a medium-range ballistic missile designed not just to destroy targets, but to send a message. Russia is innovating, and it's willing to use its most advanced technology to achieve its goals. Ukraine's response was swift. President Zelensky called the missile's use a clear and severe escalation in the conflict. He wasn't exaggerating. This isn't just a new weapon, it's a symbol of Russia's readiness to push boundaries and challenge the West to respond. But the implications go even deeper. The Pentagon has suggested that the missile's use was pre-announced through nuclear risk reduction channels, a rare move that highlights its potential for triggering unintended consequences. While Russia insists it's a conventional weapon, its speed, range, and capabilities blur the lines between traditional and strategic arms. For NATO, this raises an urgent question. How do you counter a weapon designed to be unstoppable? On the other side of this conflict, President Zelensky is fighting his own battle not just against Russian forces, but to keep Western support strong. In the wake of the missile strike, Zelensky took to social media to rally allies. He accused Putin of spitting in the face of those seeking peace and called for a stronger, more united response from the West. For Zelensky, this isn't just about Ukraine's survival, it's about the principles of international order. He's seen what happens when nations hesitate. Earlier this year, he watched as North Korean troops joined Russian forces in Ukraine, signaling an alarming expansion of Moscow's alliances. Now, with advanced missiles targeting his cities, he's warning the West that inaction could embolden Russia further. But his calls for action come with risks. NATO countries are already walking a fine line, balancing support for Ukraine with the fear of escalating the conflict into a broader war. Zelensky's plea is clear. If the West doesn't step up now, the cost of inaction could be far greater down the line. The missile strike and Putin's warnings have triggered a wave of reactions from global leaders. In the US, officials are grappling with the implications of their recent decisions to allow long-range missile strikes on Russian territory. While these actions have been framed as necessary for Ukraine's defense, they have also drawn sharp criticism from some who fear they could provoke a broader confrontation. Across the Atlantic, the UK has faced similar debates. The use of British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles in strikes on Russian soil has drawn condemnation from Moscow, with the Russian ambassador to the UK accusing Britain of being directly involved in the war. This isn't just rhetoric. Russia sees these actions as a direct threat, and it's using them to justify its own escalations. Meanwhile, NATO has found itself at a critical juncture. Emergency meetings have been held to discuss the implications of Russia's hypersonic missile deployment and Putin's threats to target Western military facilities. NATO leaders are walking a fine line. On one hand, they need to show unity and strength in the face of Russian aggression. On the other, they're acutely aware of the risks of provoking a direct confrontation with a nuclear-armed adversary. For nations like Germany and France, which have been more cautious in their approach to the conflict, the missile strike is a wake-up call. The question they now face is whether to ramp up their support for Ukraine or push for diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation. Either way, the choices made in the coming weeks could have far-reaching consequences. So what does all of this mean for the future of the conflict? The deployment of the Oreshnik missile and Putin's threats against the West signal a shift toward a more dangerous phase. This isn't just about Ukraine anymore. It's about testing the limits of international resolve. For Russia, the use of advanced weapons is a calculated risk. It's a way to project power and challenge NATO without directly engaging its forces. For the West, it's a wake-up call. The conflict is evolving, and the strategies that worked in the past may not be enough to address the new threats. Then there's the nuclear question. Putin's references to Russia's updated rules on nuclear weapon use are impossible to ignore. They serve as a reminder that in this high-stakes game, the consequences of miscalculation could be catastrophic. For Western leaders, the challenge is clear. Find a way to deter further escalation without provoking a response that could spiral out of control. We're at a crossroads. A hypersonic missile has shattered the illusion of safety. A leader with global ambitions has issued a warning that no one can afford to ignore. And the world is watching, waiting to see how the West will respond. The choices made in the coming days and weeks could shape the future of global security for generations. But here's the question. What would you do? Should the US and UK double down on their support for Ukraine? Or is it time to pull back and focus on de-escalation? And what do you think about this new Russian missile? Is it a game changer or just another weapon in a long and tragic war? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth looks at the stories shaping our world. And make sure you hit that bell icon so you don't miss a single update. This is a story that's far from over, and we'll be here to bring you every twist and turn.